The Grand Canyon is 277 miles long, up to 80 miles wide, and attains a depth of over a mile. While the specific geologic processes and timing that form the Grand Canyon are the subject of debate by geologists, recent evidence suggests the Colorado River established its course through the canyon at least 17 million years ago. When countries assess their annual carbon dioxide emissions, they count up the cars and power stations, but bushfires are not included, presumably because they're deemed to be events beyond human control. In Australia, Victoria alone sees several hundred thousand hectares burn each year. In both 2004 and the present summer, the figure has been over 1 million hectares. At the beginning of each fiscal year, funds are allocated to each state account in accordance with the university's financial plan. Funds are allocated to each account by object of expenditure. Account managers are responsible for ensuring that adequate funds are available in an appropriate object before initiating transactions to use the funds. While blue is one of the most popular colors, it is one of the least appetizing. Blue food is rare in nature. Food researchers say that when humans search for food, they learn to avoid toxic or spoiled objects, which are often blue, black, or purple. When food dyed blue is served to study objects, they lose appetite. Although it hails from a remote region of the western Himalayas, this plant now looks entirely at home on the banks of English rivers. Brought to the UK in 1839, it quickly escaped from the Victorian gardens and colonized riverbanks and damp woodlands. Now it is spreading across Europe, New Zealand, Canada, and the US. How do we imagine the unimaginable? If we're asked to think of an object, say a yellow tulip, a picture immediately forms in our mind. But what if we try to imagine a concept, such as the square root of a negative number? The core of the problem was the immense disparity between the country's productive capacity and the ability of people to consume. Great innovations in productive techniques during and after the war raised the output of industry beyond the purchasing capacity of US farmers and wage earners. Pluto lost its official status as a planet yesterday when the International Astronomical Union downsized the solar system from 9 to 8 planets. Although there had been passionate debate at the IAU General Assembly meeting in Prague about the definition of a planet and whether Pluto met the specifications, the audience greeted the decision to exclude it with applause. Although Botswana's economic outlook remains strong, the devastation that AIDS has caused threatens to destroy the country's future. In 2001, Botswana has the highest rates of HIV infection in the world. With the help of international donors, it launched an ambitious national campaign that provided free antiviral drugs to anyone who needed them. And by March 2004, Botswana's infection rate has dropped significantly. New research shows that during the global financial crisis, workers who stayed in jobs did not reduce their working hours, despite the claims that cuts in hours have led to job losses. A study found that the life of people who stayed with the same employer remained relatively unchanged. Food is one of the most important things you ever buy, and yet most people never bother to think about their food and where it comes from. People spend a lot more time worrying about what kind of blue jeans to wear, what kind of video games to play, and what kind of computers to buy. Tesla came over from Graz and went to work for Thomas Edison. Nevertheless, Edison offered him a job, promising Tesla $50,000 if Tesla could redesign Edison's breakdown-prone DC generator designs. The new generator designs were a vast improvement over Edison's originals. Upon completing the job, Tesla went to Edison to collect the $50,000 promised for the task. Tesla, Edison replied, "You don't understand our American humor," and Tesla was never paid. A young man from a small provincial town, a man without independent wealth, without powerful family connections, and without a university education, moved to London in the late 1580s, and in a remarkably short time became the greatest playwright not of his age alone, but of all time. How did Shakespeare become Shakespeare? Lincoln's apparently radical change of mind about his willpower to emancipate slaves was caused by the escalating scope of war, which convinced him that any measure to weaken the Confederacy and strengthen the Union war effort was justifiable as a military necessity. Akimbo. This must be one of the odder-looking words in the language. It puzzles us, in part because it doesn't seem to have any relatives. What's more, it is now virtually a fossil word. Until recently, almost invariably found in arms, akimbo, a posture in which a person stands with hands on hips and elbows sharply bent outward, one that signals impatience and hostility. Yellow is the most optimistic color, yet surprisingly, people lose their tempers most often in yellow rooms, and babies cry more in them. The reason may be that yellow is the hardest color on the eye. On the other hand, it speeds metabolism and enhances concentration. Think of yellow legal pads and post-it notes. The situation is similar to a pregnant woman that has twin babies in her belly. Avi Loeb of the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics is proposing the idea in a paper that's been accepted for publication in an astrophysical journal Letters. Moods may also have an effect on how information is processed by influencing the extent to which judges rely on pre-existing internal information or focus on new external information. Positive moods promote more holistic and top-down processing style, while negative moods recruit more stimulus-driven and bottom-up processing. Such cross-protection is usually seen between two animals, but Gore studies the same sort of mutualism in microbes. He and his team demonstrated the first experimental example of that cross-protective relationship in drug-resistant microbes, using two strains of antibiotic-resistant E. coli bacteria, one resistant to ampicillin, the other to chloramphenicol. Modern buildings have to achieve certain performance requirements, at least to satisfy those of building codes, to provide a safe, healthy, and comfortable environment. However, these conditioned environments demand resources in energy and materials, which are both limited in supply, to build and operate. Botanic gardens are scientific and cultural institutions established to collect, study, exchange, and display plants for research and for the education and enjoyment of the public. There are major botanic gardens in each capital city. Zoological parks and aquariums are primarily engaged in the breeding, preservation, study, and display of native and exotic fauna in captivity. The best comparison is likely a magnetar, a young neutron star with a powerful magnetic field, the researchers said. Magnetars also produce bright X-ray flares. While magnetars are thought to be young stars, the two flaring objects in this study reside near elliptical galaxies, which contain older stars. So the objects are likely too old to be magnetars, the researchers said. As a historian, if you really want to understand the sensibilities of those who live in the past, you must be like a novelist and get into the skins of your characters and think and feel as they do. You're asked to imagine what it's like to be a peasant in medieval times, asking the sort of questions a peasant may ask. What the writer is saying is that a historian needs imaginative sympathy with ordinary people in the past. It is difficult to tell whether the speaker approves of Hemingway's lifestyle or not. He was famously macho and spent a lot of time hunting wild animals, going to wars, and getting into fights. All these things got into his books, and the speaker thinks that this is not necessarily a good thing, as it means that too many people prefer to read about his life than read his books. The beginning of the 21st century will be remembered not for military conflicts or political events, but for a whole new age of globalization, a flattening of the world. The explosion of advanced technologies now means that suddenly knowledge pools and resources have connected all over the planet, leveling the playing field as never before. The primary application we're targeting at first is to give people a decision aid during rehabilitation following an acute knee injury to help them understand when they can perform particular activities and when they can move to different intensities of particular activities, a useful thing to take a crack at. Humans need to use energy in order to exist, so it is unsurprising that the way people have been producing energy is largely responsible for current environmental problems. Pollution comes in many forms, but those that are most concerning because of their impact on health result from the combustion of fuels in power stations and cars. The border itself between Mexico and the United States is fraught with a mix of urban and desert terrain and spans over 1,900 miles. Both the uninhabited areas of the border and urban areas are where the most drug trafficking and illegal crossings take place. Crime is prevalent in urban cities like El Paso, Texas, and San Diego, California.
Networking is easy and fun because it taps into this human predilection to talk about ourselves when asked. Consider successful networking as little more than the process of guiding a person to tell you about his life, what he's doing, the company that employs him, and his current industry. It's not that human activities didn't impact wildlife at all, of course. Heavily hunted species like white-tailed deer, gray squirrels, and raccoons were photographed somewhat less often in hunted areas. Coyotes showed up more often in hunted areas. While most species didn't avoid hiking trails, the predator actually preferred them. Trade unions originated in Europe during the Industrial Revolution. Because of the machinery that had become commonplace, skilled labor became less in demand, so employers had nearly all of the bargaining power. Employers mistreated the workers and paid them too little for the work they did. Trade unions were organized that would help in the improvement of working conditions. Another administration option is to bake marijuana at a relatively low temperature to kill any dangerous microorganisms, and then allow that patient to eat it or drink it. Both of these methods of administration make smoking the drug unnecessary. However, criticism of medical marijuana has also been raised because as a natural plant, it cannot be patented and marketed by pharmaceutical companies and is unlikely to win widespread medical acceptance. The researchers think that long-distance flyers such as American golden plover and the white-rumped sandpiper picked up the spores while lining their nests. Then when the birds arrive in new places, they molt, leaving behind the feathers and their precious cargo to start growing again at the other end of the world. In the photo, the wild cat's huge paws are clamped onto the side of the white safari jeep, in which Chapel was a passenger. Almost as tall as the jeep on her hind legs, she appears to be forcing the muzzle into the black window. First discovered in 2007, fast radio bursts continue to defy explanation. These cosmic chirps last thousands of seconds. The characteristic of the radio pulses suggests that they came from galaxies billions of light years away. However, new work points to a much closer origin, flaring stars within our own galaxy. The brain is divided into two hemispheres, called the left and right hemispheres. Each hemisphere provided a different set of functions, behaviors, and controls. The right hemisphere is often called the creative side of the brain, while the left hemisphere is the logical and analytical side of brain. The right hemisphere controls the left part of the body, and the left hemisphere controls the right side. Weakness in electronics, auto, and gas station sales dragged down overall retail sales last month. But excluding those three categories, retailers enjoyed a healthy increase across the board, according to government figures released Wednesday. Moreover, December sales numbers were also revised higher.
It isn't rare for private equity houses to hire grads fresh out of business school, he said, but 9 times out of 10, the students who nab these jobs are the ones who had private equity experience under their belt before even starting their MBA program.
How quickly is the world's population growing? In the United States and other developed countries, the current growth rate is very low. In most developing countries, the human population is growing at 3 people per second. Because of this busting growth rate, human population is growing to reach 9 billion within your lifetime. Electronic discourse is one form of interactive electronic communication. In this study, we reserve the term for the two-directional text, in which one person using a keyboard writes language that appears on sender's monitor and is transmitted to the monitor of recipient, who responds by keyboard. For any marketing course that requires development of marketing plan, such as marketing management, marketing strategy, and segmentation support marketing. This is the only planning handbook that guides students through the step-by-step creation of customized marketing plan, while offering commercial software to aid in the process. Written examinations are a fact of life for most high school and university students. However, recent studies have shown that this traditional form of assessment may not be an accurate indicator of academic performance. Tests have shown that many students experience anxiety during exam weeks, which leads to poorer results. As a result, some learning institutions are replacing exams with alternative assessments, such as group work and oral presentations. Since its inception, the UN system has been working to ensure adequate food for all through sustainable agriculture. The majority of the world's poorest people live in rural areas of developing countries. They depend on agriculture and related activities for their livelihood. This makes them particularly vulnerable to man-made and natural influences that reduce agricultural production. It seems that language appeared from nowhere, since no other species has anything resembling human language. However, other animals do possess basic systems for perceiving and producing sounds that enable them to communicate. These systems may have been in place before the appearance of language.
Augustus was given the powers of an absolute monarch, but he presented himself as the preserver of republican tradition. He treated the Senate, or State Council, with great respect and was made consul year after year. He successfully reduced the political power of the army by retiring many soldiers, but giving them land or money to keep their loyalty. As to the Industrial Revolution, one cannot dispute today the fact that it has succeeded in inaugurating in a number of countries a level of mass prosperity which was undreamed of in the days preceding the Industrial Revolution. But on the immediate impact of Industrial Revolution, there were substantial divergences among writers.
The diversity of human language may be compared to the diversity of the natural world. Just as the extinction of different plants deprives humanity of biomedical resources, so too would the extinction of other languages lead to deprivation of culture, wealth, and art. If bonus or incentive pay schemes work so well for senior executives and bankers, why does everyone not get them? After all, many jobs involve making important decisions or taking risks. Is there anything about corporate decisions and financial risks that makes these categories of work special in terms of how they need to be incentivized and rewarded?
Major breeding areas and breeding islands are shown as dark green areas or darts. Open darts show no breeding records on the islands, and are also used for offshore sightseeing, that is from ships or boats. Other areas where a species is not meant to be seen are plain pale green, with pale green hatching, where records are usually sparse.
The uniquely scented flavor of vanilla is second only to chocolate in popularity on the world's palate. It's also the second most expensive spice after saffron. But highly labor-intensive cultivation methods and the plant's temperamental life cycle and propagation mean production on a global scale is struggling to keep up with the increasing demand for the product. This book is not ordinary book and should not be read through from beginning to end. It contains many different adventures, and the path you take will depend on the choices you make along the way. The success or failure of your mission will depend on the decisions you make, so you think carefully before choosing. Legal writing is usually less discursive than writing in other humanities subjects, and precision is more important than variety. Sentence structure should not be too complex. It is usually unnecessary to make extensive use of adjectives or adverbs, and consistency of terms is often required. The semiconductor industry has been able to improve the performance of electric systems for more than 4 decades by making ever smaller devices. However, this approach will soon encounter both scientific and technical limits, which is why the industry is exploring a number of alternative device technologies. The Japanese tea ceremony is a ritual influenced by Buddhism in which green tea is prepared and served to a small group of guests in a peaceful setting. The ceremony can take as long as hours, and there are many traditional gestures that both server and the guest must perform. Long isolated from Western Europe, Russia grew up without participating in shared developments like the Reformation. Russians took pride in their unique culture and found dubious value in foreign ideals. As a result, Russia is the most unusual member of the European family, if indeed it can be considered one at all. This question is still hotly debated, particularly amongst Russians. exhilarating, exhausting, and intense. These are just some of the words used to describe doing an MBA. Everyone's experience of doing MBA is, of course, different through denying that it's hard and a demanding work whichever course you do. MBA is one of the fastest growing area of studying in the UK, so that must be a sustainable benefit against form in one pain.
The provision of accurate and authoritative statistical information strengthens our society. It provides a basis for decisions to be made on public policy, such as determining electoral boundaries and where to locate schools and hospitals. It also allows businesses to know their market, grow their business, and improve their marketing strategies by targeting their activities appropriately.
Hundreds of millions of American people eat fast food every day without giving it too much thought, unaware of the subtle and not so subtle ramification of their purchases. They just grab their tray off the counter, find a table, take a seat, unwrap the paper, and dig in. The whole experience is transitory and soon forgotten. Australians do speak English. However, for some tourists and travelers, it can be difficult to understand the slang. Also, the links between Australian and American English was seen to be very tenuous. At least some colloquialism in Australian English does not exist in other types of English. Introvert, or those of us with introverted tendencies, tend to recharge by spending time alone. They lose energy from being around people for long periods of time, particularly large crowds. Extroverts, on the other hand, gain energy from other people. Extroverts actually find their energy is sapped when they spend too much time alone. They recharge by being social. In classes, your teachers will talk about topics that you are studying. The information that they provide will be important to know when you take tests. You must be able to take good written notes from what your teacher says. Orientalists, like many other 19th century thinkers, conceive of humanity either in large collective terms or in abstract generalities. Orientalists are neither interested in nor capable of discussing individuals. Instead, artificial entities predominate. Similarly, the age-old distinction between Europe and Asia, or Occident and Orient, hides beneath very wide label every possible variety of human plurality. reducing it in the process to one or two terminal collective realities. The training of an actor is an intensive process which requires curiosity, courage, and commitment. You will learn how to prepare for rehearsal, how to rehearse, and how to use independent and proactive processes that inform you to do the best work possible for both stage and screen. Perhaps the most memorable benefit of the program has been the opportunity to meet in small groups, something that is difficult to arrange, such as desperate organization. Many officers would have to work together for 30 years, but would not know others' strength and weakness. The department determines whether or not the candidate has passed the examination. In cases where an appearance for the final public oral examination would constitute a substantial financial hardship for the candidate, the Director of Graduate Studies may recommend to the Dean of Graduate School that the examination be waived. Companies will want to be known not just for the financial results they generate, but equally for the imprint they leave on society as a whole. First, ensuring that their products contribute positively. Second, operating in a way that approaches a net neutral impact to the natural environment. And third, cherishing their people. When we recycle, used materials are converted into new products, reducing the need to consume natural resources. If used materials are not recycled, new products are made by extracting fresh, raw materials from the earth through mining and forestry. Recycling helps conserve important raw materials and protects natural habitats for the future. The elephant is the largest living land mammal. During evolution, its skeleton has greatly altered from the usual mammal, designed for two main reasons. One is to cope with the great weight of huge grinding cheek teeth and elongated tusk, making the skull particularly massive. The other is to support the enormous bulk of such a huge body. Business school admissions officers said the new drive to attract younger students was in part the result of realization that they had inadvertently limited the applicant pool by requiring several years' work experience. Talented students who might otherwise have gone to business school instead opted for a law or policy degree because they were intimidated by the expectation of work experience. A hazard assessment should be performed for the work involving distillation of organic liquids and should thoroughly address issues relating to residual water and possible decomposition of the solvent in question, as well as the physical placement of the distillation apparatus and heating equipment to be employed. Shrimp farmers used to hold animals in the nursery ponds for 30 to 60 days. Now they're trying to move them into grow-out ponds in less than 30 days. This reduces stress on animals and dramatically increases survivals in the grow-out ponds. Many farms that abandoned nursery ponds have gone back to them, and the results have been surprisingly positive. They're using the old uncovered earthen nursery ponds. First-year university students have designed and built a groundbreaking electric car that recharges itself. 50 students from the University of Sydney's Faculty of Engineering spent 5 months working together bits of plywood, foam, and fiberglass to build the Mango concept car. They developed the specifications and hand-built the car. It's a pretty radical design, a 4-wheel drive with a motor in each wheel. Along with customary classes on subjects such as finance, accounting, and marketing, today's MBA students are enrolling on courses for environmental policy and stewardship. Indeed, more than half of business schools require a course in environmental sustainability or corporate social responsibility, according to a survey of 91 U.S. business schools published in October 2005. Tourism is a challenging sector on which divide statistics since businesses serving tourists also serving local people. Therefore, it is not straightforward to estimate how much business sector's revenues and how many jobs are due to tourist expenditures. The preparation of abstracts is an intellectual effort, requiring general familiarity with the subject. To bring out the salient points of an author's argument calls for skills and experience. Consequently, a considerable amount of qualified manpower that could be used to advantage in other ways must be diverted to tasks of facilitating access to information. public demand for education has remained strong, reflecting the importance of education as a means of social progress. Aware of the social value of education to the world of the work, the government continues to innovate and update the education system in order to produce a qualified and competent workforce. A unique characteristic of online shopping environments is that they allow vendors to create retail interfaces with highly interactive features. One desirable form of interactivity from a consumer perspective is the implementation of sophisticated tools to assist shoppers in their purchase decisions by customizing the electronic shopping environment to their individual preferences. A national study into fraud by bookkeepers employed at a small and medium-sized businesses has uncovered 65 instances of theft in more than 5 years, with more than $61 million stolen. Of the cases identified by the research, 56 involved women and 9 instances involved men. However, male bookkeepers who defrauded their employer stole 3 times, on average, the amount that women stole. Internal combustion engine, enabling the driver to decide which source of power is appropriate for the travel requirements of given journey. Major US auto manufacturers are now developing feasible hybrid electric vehicles, and some are exploring fuel cell technology for their electric cars. Imagine living all your life as the only family on your street. Then, one morning, you open the front door and discover houses all around you. You see neighbors tending their gardens and children walking to school. Where did all that people come from? What if the answer turned out to be that they had always been there, you just hadn't seen them? It seems that, when it comes to love, men and women are designed to misconstrue, misread, and misunderstand one another and themselves. Look more closely at the unconscious workings of the mating mind, however, and you discover that in fact they make good sense.
Tesla's theoretical work formed the basis of modern alternating current electric power systems. Thomas Edison promised him almost $1 million in today's money to undertake motor and generator improvement. However, when Tesla ethical servs asked about the money, Edison reportedly replied, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor. The pair became arch rivals."
Certainly, one of the important values of literature is that it nourishes our emotional lives. An effective literary work may seem to speak directly to us, especially if we are ripe for it. The inner life that good writers reveal in their characters often gives us glimpses of some portion of ourselves. We can be moved to laugh, cry, tremble, dream, ponder, shriek, or rage with a character by simply turning the page instead of turning our lives upside down. There is no single method of learning that guarantees success. How we learn depends on many different factors, and what works best for you may be the same approach used for the other students, even if they study the same course. We are all unique learners, although some patterns emerge within groups of students. Have you ever pictured a world without light? Just think how much we rely on man-made light sources in our lives. Without engineers, we wouldn't be able to live the way we do. No streetlights, no TV, no computer displays, no house light. Engineers design and build all these things. Teenage girls are continuing to outperform boys in English, while the gender gap in achievements in math and science has almost disappeared. The figures show that last year, 80% of 14-year-old girls reached the expected level in English, compared with 65% of boys. But in math, the girls are just 1% ahead of boys, while in science the difference is 2%. Before the discovery of Australia, people in the Old World were convinced that all swans were white, an unassailable belief as it seemed completely confirmed by empirical evidence. The sighting of the first black swan might have been an interesting surprise for a few ornithologists, and others extremely concerned with the coloring of birds, but that is not where the significance of the story lies. The emergence of information technology has created new products, processes, and distribution systems. New products include the computer, the internet, and digital TV. New processes include internet banking, automated inventory control, and automated teller machines. And new distribution systems include cable and satellite TV. The maximum yield of plants, determined by their genetic potential, is seldom achieved because factors such as insufficient water or nutrients, adverse climate condition, plant diseases, and insect damage will limit growth at some stage. Plants subjected to these biotic and abiotic constraints are said to be stressed. You used to think that being green was a luxury for your company, but climate change has made you realize that you can no longer ignore it. The buzz is about becoming carbon neutral. But where do you start? Consider your drivers. Do you want to become carbon neutral for marketing reasons, for financial reasons, or to help save the planet? The brain is divided into its hemispheres by a prominent groove. At the base of this lies nerve fibers, which enable these two halves of the brain to communicate with each other. But the left hemisphere usually controls movement and sensation in the right side of the body, while the right hemisphere similarly controls the left side of the body.
To work effectively with the heterogeneous student populations found in our schools, educators have the responsibility of acknowledging the cultural backgrounds of their students and the cultural setting in which the school is located in order to develop effective instructional strategies. The purpose of the informative speech is to provide interesting, useful, and unique information to your audience. By dedicating yourself to the goals of providing information and appealing to your audience, you can take a positive step towards succeeding in your efforts as an informative speaker.
Thus, a country might possess a sizable rural population, but have an economic system in which the interests of the voters were predominantly related to their incomes, not to their occupations or location. And in such a country, the political system would be unlikely to include an important agrarian party. Investigators also compared those microbes with those living in 52 other soil samples taken from all around the planet. The park had organisms that also exist in deserts, frozen tundra, forests, rainforests, and prairies. Antarctica was the only area that had microbes that did not overlap with those found in Central Park. Only a small percentage of the park's microbes were found to be already listed in databases. A constellation is an area in the celestial sphere in which a group of stars forms an imaginary outline or pattern, typically representing an animal, mythological person, or creature, or an inanimate object. The origins of the earliest constellations likely go back to prehistory. Fractional reserve banking is a banking system in which banks only hold a fraction of the money their customers deposit as reserves. This allows them to use the rest of it to make loans and thereby essentially create new money. This gives commercial banks the power to directly affect the money supply. In spite of the spectacularly high quality of life for the vast majority of the people who live in the European Union, its inhabitant seems obsessed by the region's relative decline in the world. Slow economic growth rates and high unemployment have reinforced the impression that Europe is unhappy with today and unsure of tomorrow. Australia has one of the world's most important mining industries. It is a major exporter of coal, iron, ore, gold, and copper, and is self-sufficient in all minerals bar petroleum. Since the first discoveries, the coal in 1798, mineral production has risen every year in the decade to 1992, it doubled. The ritual of the state opening of Parliament still illustrates the basis of the British Constitution. The sovereignty of the royal family has passed to the sovereignty of Parliament, leaving the monarchy with the trappings of power, while prime ministers are still denied the kind of status that is given to American and French presidents. Most peasants remained self-sufficient and skeptical about money, and with good reason. The triumph of capitalism probably made them worse off. They now had to deal with a centralized imperial state that was collecting tax more efficiently, giving more power to landlords, and slowly reducing customary peasant rights to land and produce. Another method governments use to try and influence the private sector is economic planning. For a long time now, socialist and communist states have used planning as an alternative to the price mechanism, organizing production and distributing their resources according to social and strategic needs, rather than based on purely economic considerations. Foam-filled furniture is very dangerous if it catches fire, and foam quickly produces a high temperature, thick smoke, and poisonous gases, including carbon monoxide. Therefore, set levels of fire resistance have been established for new and second-hand upholstered furniture and other similar products. The starting point of Bergson's theory is the experience of time and motion. Time is the reality we experience most directly, but this doesn't mean that we can capture this experience mentally. The past is gone, and the future is yet to come. The only reality is the present, which is real through our experience. It is important to note that saving is not the same as investment. It is important to note that saving is not the same as investment. Saving is about cash, while investment is about the real product. The difference is important because of money, being liquid, can leak out of the economic system, which it does when someone who is putting aside unspent income keeps it under the mattress. The Atlantic coast of the peninsula can be thought of as the cold side, and the sea on this coast tends to be clear and cold, with a variety of seaweeds growing along the rocky shoreline. On a hot day, however, this cold water can be very refreshing, and is said to be less hospitable to sharks, which prefer warmer waters. All the works of art shown in this exhibition were purchased on a shoestring budget. The criteria that the curators had to follow were that works must be acquired cheaply, appeal to a broad range of tastes, and fit with unusual environments. Thus, many of our better-known modern artists are not represented. There are many kinds of pond, but nearly all are small bodies of shallow, stagnant water in which plants with roots can grow. Water movement is slight and temperatures fluctuate widely. The wealth of plants ensures that during daylight hours oxygen is plentiful. However, at night, when photosynthesis no longer takes place, oxygen supplies can fall very low. Before the time of Alexander the Great, the only Eastern people who could be compared with the Greeks in the fields of science and philosophy were from the Indian subcontinent. However, because so little is known about Indian chronology, it is difficult to tell how much of their science was original and how much was the result of Greek influence. While far fewer people these days write letters and therefore have less use for stamps, there are still a few categories of stamps which attract collectors. Stamps in common use for an indefinite period, until the price goes up, are called definitive issues, while a more collectible type of stamp is the commemorative issue, honoring people, events, and anniversaries. Most succulent plants are found in regions where there is little rainfall, dry air, plenty of sunshine, porous soils, and high temperatures during part of the year. These conditions have caused changes in plant structures, which have resulted in greatly increased thickness of stems, leaves, and sometimes roots, enabling them to store moisture from the infrequent rains. Australia has one of the world's most important mining industries. It is a major exporter of coal, iron ore, gold, and copper, and is self-sufficient in all minerals bar petroleum. Since the first discoveries, the coal in 1798, mineral production has risen every year in the decade to 1992, it doubled. It was found that while many companies express interest in Jacobson's use case approach, actual scenario usage often falls outside what is described in textbooks and standard methodologies. Users therefore face significant scenario management problems not yet addressed adequately in theory or practice, and are demanding solutions to these problems. The current measure has remained virtually unchanged over the past 30 years. Yet, during that time, there have been marked changes in the nation's economy and society, and in public policies that have affected families' economic well-being, which is not reflected in the measure. The latest scientific evidence on the nature and strength of the links between diet and chronic diseases is examined and discussed in detail in the following sections of this report. This section gives an overall view of the current situation and trends in chronic diseases at the global level. In spite of the spectacularly high quality of life enjoyed by the vast majority of the people who live in the European Union, its inhabitants seem obsessed by the region's relative decline in the world. Slow economic growth rates and high unemployment have reinforced the impression that Europe is unhappy with today and unsure of tomorrow. If countries can specialize in certain goods, they can benefit from economies of scale and lower average cost. This is especially true in the industries with high fixed costs, or that require a high level of investment. The benefits of the economy of scale will ultimately lead to lower prices for consumers and greater efficiency for exporting firms. on May 3, a couple of weeks later, Lincoln issued an executive order calling for 43,000 three-year volunteers for the Army, and also increasing the size of the regular Army and Navy by 40,000 men. Both of these actions were in apparent violation of the Constitution.
We all know about bacteria, viruses, and microscopic protozoa. We can watch the way that these tiny agents move into our bodies and damage our organs. We have a growing understanding of how our body mounts defensive strategies that fight off these invaders, and have built some clever chemical that can help mount an assault on these biovillains. Nature offers no greater splendor than the starry sky on a clear, dark night, silent and jeweled with the constellations of ancient myth and legend. The night sky has inspired wonder throughout the ages, a wonder that leads our imaginations far from the confines of Earth and the pace of the present day, and out into the distant reaches of space and cosmic time itself. Today, telecommunication is widespread and devices that assist the progress are common in many parts of the world. There is also a vast array of networks that connect these devices, including computer, telephone, and cable networks. Computer communication across the internet, such as email and instant messaging, is just one of many examples of telecommunication. The fact is that those different types of services affect many different dimensions of well-being of people, and define the human well-being is also extremely challenging. However, we identified that there are certain items provide basic material for life, whether it be food, shelter, or happiness. A thesis is a claim that you can argue for or against. It should be something that you can present persuasively and clearly. The scope of your paper. So keep in mind that page count. If possible, your thesis should be somewhat original. The Royal Institution is an organization that has been around for 209 years. Many of the people that have worked here have been scientists themselves, including Michael Faraday. He made the discoveries that may be generating and using electricity much easier, making it possible for us all to switch on lights, cook for dinner, play games, consoles, much more. Yet it is precisely in observing the intertwinings of success and failure that Chasing the Flame makes its greatest mark. With piercing insight and relentless logic, it reveals the pitfalls of international politics and details an intricate struggle between individual and institution. It haunts us with the poignant truth that even a great man can do only so much to reinvent the world. The most important issue is concerned with the problem of funding. Social services receive different donations or grants from the government. However, these sums are not sufficient for the solution of all problems. The second most important issue consists of huge spending. The money social services achieve is not enough for normal functioning. The third problem affecting human services is the lack of skilled and experienced employees. The United States is at present the world's market for motor cars and trucks. An agent for the U.S. Bureau of Foreign and Domestic Commerce reports a prosperous condition of affairs prevailing in Japan, which is buying more automobiles, especially large cars, than ever before. The asteroid that slammed into the Moon 3.8 billion years ago, creating the Imbrium Basin, may have had a diameter of at least 150 miles. According to a new estimate, the work helps explain puzzling geological features on the Moon's near side and has implications for understanding the evolution of the early solar system. The terms summary and abstract are often used interchangeably, resulting in some confusion. This problem arises because there are two distinct types of abstracts: descriptive and informative. The informative abstract is sometimes called summary. The descriptive is not. The descriptive abstract is usually only 2 or 3 sentences in length, hence it is not a summary or very informative.
A total of 5 ozone ascents were taken at Bharati Station, Indian Mission Antarctica from April to June 2016. As the stratospheric temperatures reduced to 82.24 on 20th June 2016, indicating the formation of stratospheric clouds. Leading scientists at Bharati Station feared that Montreal Accord has not succeeded to control the emission of ozone-depleting gases in the atmosphere. Sleep behavior is also known as sleep disorder. People with sleep disorder often talk or walk in their sleep. They are not aware of what they are talking about or where they are going. There isn't any serious effects on body in general, but it may connect it to the mental health. People with childhood traumas, unspeakable problem or depression are the ones with different sleep behavior. There isn't any specific cure of it yet, as it's a short-time disorder that heals with time. If it's not leaving the person and hurting in some way, the person should see the doctor immediately. These decisions are highly nuanced. Of course, we use a lot of data to inform our decisions, but we also rely very heavily on iteration, research, testing, intuition, and human empathy. Now, sometimes the designers who work on these products are called data-driven, which is a term that totally drives us bonkers. The fact is, it would be irresponsible of us not to rigorously test our designs when so many people are counting on us to get it right. Artificial neural networks have recently become the state-of-the-art technique for crucial signal processing applications such as specific frequencies classification, diseases detection in power electronics circuitry, and motor fault detection. This is an expected outcome, as there are numerous advantages of using an adaptive and compact deep counterparts, which particularly it can be efficiently trained with a limited data set of signals, besides requiring data transformation. Biology is the natural science that studies life and living organisms, including their physical structure, chemical processes, physiological mechanisms, and evolution. Certain unifying concepts consolidate it into a single and coherent field that recognizes genes as the basic unit of heredity, and evolution as the engine that propels the creation and extinction.
Charlie Chaplin and his brother Sidney were placed in an orphanage at a very early age. Becoming a vaudeville performer, he joined Fred Karno's company in 1906. He made his film debut in Making a Living, 1914, and introduced the famous seedy and soft-hearted gentleman tramp routine, which became his hallmark. Numerous films for various studios brought him world fame, all based on his mastery of pathos and slapstick acrobatics. English colonies emerged along the eastern seaboard for a variety of reasons. People, primarily men, originally migrated to Virginia to find gold and silver to make a quick profit. After it became evident that there were no precious metals in the area, men came to Virginia to start cultivating cash crops like tobacco. History is selective. What history books tell us about the past is not everything that happened, but what historians have selected. They cannot put in everything. Choices have to be made. Choices must similarly be made about which aspects of the past should be formally taught to the next generation in the shape of school history lessons.
Aquaculture, also known as aquafarming, is the farming of aquatic organisms such as fish, crustaceans, mollusks, and aquatic plants. Aquaculture involves cultivating freshwater and saltwater populations under controlled conditions. Tissues are grouped together in the body to form organs. These include the brain, heart, lungs, kidneys, and liver. Each body organ has a specific shape and is made up of different types of tissue that work together. For example, the heart consists mainly of a specialized type of muscle tissue, which contracts rhythmically to provide the heart's pumping action. The life of a hunter-gatherer is indeed, as Thomas Hobbes said of the state of nature, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. In some respects, to be sure, wandering through the jungle bagging monkeys may be preferable to the hard slog of subsistence agriculture.